Thank you everyone for joining today to learn more about our International Plastic Pellet Count. This is our first one, and we're so excited to see the turnout and the excitement around this issue that's so important. So to first go over what pellets are, if you've managed to make it this far, but still not sure what we're talking about. The plastic pellet problem is one throughout the world. Plastic pellets are small, round, typically between 2 and 5 millimeters, and come in all sorts of different colors. They're also known as nurdles, and they're known as what are pre-production plastics, or basically, oftentimes I think we think of the plastic pollution as bottles or straws washing up on our shores, but these are things that haven't even been made into those items yet. Plastics are microplastics, but not all microplastics are pellets, which I think is one of the important parts of why we're trying to do this project together. And also pellets are just terrible for the ecosystem. They absorb harmful chemicals like DDT, PCBs, and mercury. And they also then make it their way into the food chain by animals who are mistaking them for food. And we have an estimated 10 trillion plastic pellets entering our oceans each year. So this is a problem that's just going to keep growing unless we take some collective action. Which is why, for our next slide, we're so excited to have everyone joining us for the International Plastic Pellet Count. So this is our chance to work together across the globe to identify pellets throughout so many different ecosystems and essential waterways and share what we find so then we can use that information for further action and advocacy so we can help put a stop to the problem. Today, our agenda is going to have a bunch of different speakers. I'm going to give you a high-level view, and we'll continue to move throughout the day. So our first speaker is going to be from Nurdle Patrol, who's going to go over how to do a pellet hunt on the beach, and also reporting your data. Then we're going to be joined by Charleston Waterkeeper and Charleston Surfrider on how to do a pellet hunt in a wetland and how to organize an event. Then we'll hear from Three Rivers Waterkeeper on how to do a pellet hunt on a river and how to pick a site. Then we'll be joined by Five Gyres on how to use the Trash Blitz app to record pellets, as well as if you're doing your hunt on public lands. And then hear from Perg on solutions and advocacy. Also realizing I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Chelsea. I'm the Clean Water Defense Campaign Manager for Waterkeeper Alliance, and will be the one showing back up throughout the day to move us along. So again, thank you so much for your time and your interest. And I'm going to turn it over to Jace from Nurdle Patrol to get us started.
Great, appreciate it. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of give you a rundown of how to do a nurdle survey and on a beach. And so let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. What you're going to be looking for whenever you look down in the high tide line, which I'll explain a little bit of that coming up here. But you need to know what a nurdle looks like and doesn't look like. And so this is just sort of a real simple thing I put together based on some stuff I pulled out of a high tide line. And you'll notice all these little broken pieces of plastic. That's actually secondary plastic. So the stuff Chelsea was talking about with broken bottles and just broken pieces that have already been a product, that's what you're going to see, a bunch of colorful little broken pieces. There's a lot of that. And usually when you find a lot of that, you're going to find the nurdles, which is right next to it there. And so you can notice the difference of them. The broken pieces of plastic are jagged, usually flat. You can tell they were an actual product at one time. The nurdles actually could be round, flat, square, but they have a particular shape to them. And rather than just the broken plastic. And then some other common things we find is airsoft pellets. Those are actually a product. Fishing beads, seeds are commonly mistaken. Depending on the type of beach you're on, you might actually find some shells or even eggs. So I don't know if you've ever been up in like the Delaware area, whenever you have the horseshoe crabs that are laying eggs, but the horseshoe crabs, it's hard to tell the difference between a horseshoe crab and a nurdle. How you tell the difference is you can't break or squeeze a nurdle. And so if it breaks or if it squeezes, like if it's gushy, then it's not a nurdle. Although with one caveat there, I guess we do find synthetic rubber that is the shape of a pellet, and so that could be considered a nurdle. Okay, next. Okay, this is fuzzy. You're not supposed to be able to read it, or it looks, it's, not real clear, but this is just, if anybody really wanted to get into the detail of the science behind the methodology that I'm about to explain to you in real simple terms, if you want to get into it like scientifically, this is the publication that we put out back in 2020 timeframe, and it goes into detail about the methodology. Okay, next. So our method's real simple. You go down to the beach and you look where the water has been within the last 24 hours. And there's typically an area called the strand line. And so some people call it the high tide line, some people call it the rack line, but it's the line where sticks and leaves have accumulated over the last 24 hours. And so typically the sand or the rocks, depending on your beach type, you will have a line at the very top of that of where all that debris is. That's where you want to look, because remember, these plastics float. So they're going to be at the top edge of the strand line. And once you get down to the strand line, you start counting your clock for 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, if you don't find any nurdles, then you go to nurdlepatrol.org and you put in 0 nurdles found. If there are nurdles there, you count how many you find over that 10-minute period. Then you go to nurdlepatrol.org and put where you were at and how many you found, and it'll show up on a map. And so that's what I'm going to show you next. Now, you might be asking, well, what if I look for 5 minutes and then I find one? Well, you start your 10-minute clock once you find your first nurdle. So if you go for 10 minutes and you don't find a nurdle, then that's it. And the reason we do that is because sometimes it takes a while for you to figure out where the high tide line is, where the nurdles are. And so that's why we do that 10-minute period from when you find your first nurdle. Now, if you don't find any at that, what we call the new strand line, so that's within that 24 hours, then you go up the beach. And that could anything beyond that. It could be where the tide was 2 days ago. It could be where it was 10 years ago. And so that's considered the old strand line. And this is important because whenever you put your information into nurdlepatrol.org, you need to know whether it was the new strand line or the old strand line. Now, the old strand line is where it just accumulates. These plastic pellets can last 200 to 400 years in the environment. So as you can imagine, a very high tide line, a very high strand line up on the beach is going to have more nurdles. So we say you're almost guaranteed to find some up there, but it depends on the beach you're on. Okay, let's go to the next one. So I've been talking about this strand line. This is just sort of a visual way that you can see that. You see all the debris. This is where the tide line is. The new strand line is where the water's been in the last 24 hours. You can see the sand is a little bit wet, and you have that debris line. Old strand line is anything beyond that. And so I actually had, for that old strand line, I have, where it stops at the base of the dunes, but actually, say during hurricanes or some kind of crazy storm event, that tide line could even be up in the dunes, like beyond it. So, just keep an open mind and think about, where have storms been in the last 5 years? Where would I actually want to look for the old strand line? But normally, like if you're on a typical beach that has an elevation from water and going up, you'll just look for the sticks and leaves that are older, where the last storm event was. Okay, next. And I'm not going to get into this because y'all are going to talk about that, but people say, oh, well, how do I differentiate on a river or a lake? So basically, new strand line is right at the water level, basically, and old strand line, unless you're right after a storm or something, and strand line's up on the bank. But the old strand line's anything beyond that. Okay, next. So this is what the reporting form looks like. So you got your name. You don't have to put an email or organization, although, if you want to get, because if we have any questions, we'd like to be able to email you. Because if you find like 10,000 nurdles in 10 minutes, we're going to be like, okay, we need to ask some questions for you. Although we do have people that find that many, but we'd like to talk to you. Then you can put your organization. For latitude, longitude, you don't put your latitude, longitude you don't have to type it in. You just press a button on the map and it automatically fills in. So that's I get people stressed out that's saying, "Oh, I have to have a GPS." No, you just press the map there, and it'll populate. Then you put your country you're in, do a location, and it can be the town you're in, or it can be the actual beach you're at. The more descriptive you are, the more helpful it is. And then, of course, the date and how many volunteers you're with. So if you're doing a volunteer event with 100 people, put 100 people in there. Put how long you looked at the time collected down here. You want to do, we asked for 10 minutes, but some people like to stay out there for an hour. So they would put 60 minutes in there. And then amount collected. So if you're going to do a group by group, you're going to need to put the total amount of nurdles you collected as a group. So if you have 100 people out there and you're out there for an hour, the amount you collected is, depending on what part of the country you're in, it could be a really big number. But the good thing is the database that you're putting this into, it splits how many volunteers there were by how much, by a 10-minute period, dividing by the number of people. So the map I'm about to show you is color coded based on what we call the standardized number. And it's that formula I just told you. Now, the other thing you'll see at the bottom here is new strand line or old strand line. So it's yes or no. Okay, next. Okay, so once you go and you put your data in, it immediately pops up on a map. So if you go to nurdlepatrol.org, you click on view data or map. There's a couple ways to get to it, but this is what shows up, and it's like a Google Earth platform. You could zoom into your house if you wanted to, or your favorite beach. But the data that you just put in there will show up immediately, so you can zoom into it to see it. And the colors here are based on the concentration of nurdles you found in a 10-minute period. And the reason I told you about that, the standardized amount, is because we standardize it so that you can compare one color dot to another color dot anywhere in the world, and it makes sense. Now, the one thing I didn't mention is it's all by hand only is the only way that you can do this survey. And so you can't be using tools or sieves or buckets or pool nets or stuff like that. It's by your hand only. And so that way we're able to say it's comparable. We have really bad concentrations here versus over here. And, we could probably tie it to a plastics industry or something. Okay, next. Now, after you do your survey, you can click on the colored dot and all the metadata is going to come up. And so it will tell you everything that you put in there. It will have the state, there's a scroll bar here. There's a lot of stuff you can't see, but it will have the amount you collected, how many volunteers there were, and all that kind of stuff. So you can also download any of this data from the map. So if you're on the map up in the right-hand corner, there's something called a CSV file. You click on that and you can download the information that you put in here, or all of the data, which is over 25,000 surveys done. But it's supposed to be a tool that allows you to show the problem in your community, and then you can take that information and make change in your community through policy, is what we've been doing. Okay, next. Okay, here's another example of South Carolina. They're in Charleston. Charleston Waterkeeper actually has done a really good job in putting information in here, and they were able to use the data in a lawsuit. So the data can be used in future research or in legal issues. And so it's been successful in both of those. So it's a good way to be able to store your data, download it, and use it for making change. Okay, next. Okay, this is one of the last slides I have, and it's just sort of like letting you know who's all been involved with this. Over 11,000 volunteers, over 25,000 surveys. We've got over 465 partners we work with around the world. And then we send out teacher kits to teachers that don't necessarily want to go out and do a survey, but maybe they want to teach their students about plastics entering the ocean. So we have these partner kits and teacher kits that you can get for free on our homepage at nurdlepatrol.org. And you can download all the data. Okay, next. And that's it. If you ever have any questions for me, that's my email address. And that's how you do a survey, the quick and dirty.
Thank you so much, Jace. Just one note, there is also a notes section on Nurdle Patrol, so please include that you participated in the international pellet count when you're entering data. That way we can include your participation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Katie from Surfrider and Brittany from Charleston Waterkeeper.
Hey y'all, thank you so much. We're super excited to be sharing with y'all today how to conduct a plastic pellet hunt in a salt marsh habitat. So I'm Brittany Priebus. I'm the community science manager here at Charleston Waterkeeper. And in part of my role, I manage a community science microplastic monitoring program here. And then I've also been managing our ambient pellet monitoring as well. So we have around 5 sites that we monitor monthly still around the Charleston Harbor watershed.
Hey everyone, I am Katie Abair and I currently work as a wetland scientist, but I also volunteer as the policy coordinator for the Charleston chapter of Surfrider.
Perfect. All right, so why are we interested in looking at pellets in salt marsh habitat? We like to say salt marshes are like the ecological guardians of the coast. And marsh grass vegetation, like the Spiralis altiniflores or the smooth cordgrass pictured in the bottom right there, provides provisioning, filtering, and regulating services and protects the coastline and organisms that live in marsh ecosystems. However, this filtering facilitates the trapping and accumulation of any chemicals, heavy metals, and pathogens that might be introduced to these ecosystems. And salt marshes also play an important nursery and fisheries role. So for young marine life are often living there. So the organisms that are in salt marsh habitats are often in a very vulnerable or critical life stage, meaning that anything that is introduced to them at this point in their lives is going to have, long-lasting detrimental effects throughout the rest of their lives.
Yeah, actually, according to the EPA, about a third of the threatened and endangered species in the US require wetlands. So they only live in wetlands. And then there is a variety of other freshwater, marine, and terrestrial organisms that require wetlands at some point throughout their lives for food, shelter, or breeding. Plastic pellets are made from a variety of additives, chemicals, and contaminants. And this is really concerning because research is showing that when pellets are introduced into the natural environment, they are not only absorbing other contaminants and pathogens that they come into contact with, but they are also transferring them and leaching them. So when we think about organisms, they are consuming pellets because they resemble their prey, like you can see in the bottom left. Horseshoe crabs are strikingly similar to plastic pellets. And whatever the pellet has been made with, whatever it has absorbed, it has the potential to leach into the organism. And in addition to that, there may be artificial satiation, blockages of internal organs, hunger, starvation, death. So overall, in the long term, plastic pellets could cause negative ecological consequences. It could alter the structure or health of food webs. And then, as we know, pellets are tiny, they're lightweight, they are durable, and there's a lack of proper management practices throughout the supply chain. So there is a large number of spills, of leakages, and when pellets enter the natural environment, they are extremely difficult to clean up, typically only by hand.
All right, so in selecting your marsh site, we just wanted to point out a couple things for consideration. So accessibility, one of the sites that we monitor is only accessible by ladders pictured there. So, if you don't have the capacity to bring something like that, just make sure that however you're looking to access the site is possible. Safety, sturdy ground. Marshes have a lot of mud, some unstable ground. So look for an area that's safe for volunteers or participants to conduct the 10-minute survey. It might be helpful to scout the site for the presence of pellets ahead of time. That way you can kind of direct any volunteers to where they might be able to, or might be more likely to find pellets throughout the marsh. Space. Does the site have enough space for however many volunteers or participants you'd like to have? And then staff capacity. Do you have the capacity to manage however many volunteers are going to be attending your event?
Two other safety considerations that we can speak personally about are pluff mud and riprap. So in our wetlands, pluff mud is pretty comparable, I think, to quicksand. You'll kind of continue to sink and go further down. So we want to avoid this during an event. We highly recommend that volunteers stay away from that area and stay on sturdy ground, like Brittany just mentioned. We will also be hosting near riprap here in North Charleston. And riprap can be pretty dangerous if you're not mindful of where you're walking. Rocks can move, you can get your foot or ankle stuck. So just be particularly mindful if you'll be hosting or participating in either of these environments.
All right, so finding your spot. Jace sort of touched on this with the strand line. So we say rack line, the marsh rack line, but it's interchangeable with that strand line. So small rack seems to be where we find pellets to congregate more than large rack. So just the smaller debris where the smaller material is being deposited along the marsh. These photos are from the beach, but the same thing is applicable to throughout your marsh. So just kind of walk along that rack line, make observations of where you're seeing more pellets, and that's how you're going to know where you're going to start your 10-minute sample. Katie, did you want to do that last slide?
Yeah, I think my computer just froze. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Okay. Alrighty, so if there is a large barrier like a wall, we highly recommend that you spread people out along it. This is actually a site that we sample at pretty often. And we find that the pellets are brought in during tide. They move through the marsh grass and then they hit the wall and they drop because there's nowhere else for them to go. So we find a really high concentration of pellets along the bottom of the wall, and also nestled in the marsh grass on the stems and leaves. Something else I recommend is pulling back the natural debris. So like maybe from the past season's vegetation, it's dead, it's lying there. And whenever I do that, I find an insane amount of pellets. The rightmost picture is a recent picture that I took, and that's hundreds of pellets in just one little area under the surface. So sometimes you may want to actually like dig down a bit.
All right, so starting your hunt, we recommend familiarizing yourself with the Nurdle Patrol app ahead of time. Just open it up and make sure everything is working right. That's going to make it a lot easier to record your latitude and longitude accurately when you finish your 10 minutes. Also have your collection jar open. That way you're not fumbling around with it, having to close it, open it over and over again, because you want to put as many pellets as you can into your jar in the 10 minutes as possible. So let's set your timer and go. For the purposes of the International Plastic Pellet Count Day, we recommend just counting as you collect. That way you don't have to dump all the pellets out afterwards and lay them out, count them again. And that way you can also just stay in that same spot where you did the 10-minute sample, and record your data in Nurdle Patrol right then and there. So again, it's going to accurately reflect your lat and long to where those pellets were found.
Two other considerations are making sure that you have enough jars for all of the volunteers, ideally one jar per person. That way you don't have to worry about sharing or giving your jar to someone, because 10 minutes does go by pretty quickly. And then also, for anyone who may do this regularly, pill trays are a neat hack for counting. It makes it a lot easier than trying to just sift through with your fingers. So yeah, just other considerations. And then lastly, I heard that some people are super interested in artivism, which is a combination of art and activism. So just trying to educate or create awareness through a more artistic lens. And since kind of like adopting pellets as a passion project, I have been exploring plastic pellet advocacy through art. And these are two examples of my pieces.
Thank you guys. I love these pieces so much. I'm gonna now turn it over to Captain Evan Clark from Three Rivers Waterkeeper.
Hi there. Thanks everybody for jumping on this call and going through this training, especially Kelly and Chelsea for pulling this all together, and of course Jace for his years of work with this Nurdle Patrol. It was my inspiration and guideline getting started about 3 years ago with a partner, a waterkeeper partner with Mountain Watershed or Yakagani Riverkeeper. So I'm going to get a little bit into the why as much as the how, because everybody else has really covered the how pretty well. And obviously, I will talk about how nurdling has worked for us on rivers, but we're also, as water keepers, pretty specifically focused on compliance with these plastics organizations. And over the last couple of years of looking into this, it's really interesting to me that we could make a difference around plastics. And by taking out this the red herring of consumer responsibility and just really focus on industrial pollution of plastics. So we got started when a major plastics production facility moved into the area, and we were interested to see if there was already a problem in our area and how that would affect our area. So we did a lot of baseline work. And we're working on the Ohio River and the Allegheny and Monongahela, kind of through southwestern Pennsylvania. So to get right into working on rivers, wanted to touch on Jace's point about the that strand line. We are almost always working in that old strand line, as he pointed out. Occasionally, we're working right in that new strand line, and because we all have different names for what we call those areas we work in. For me, I call them in the drift piles. So when our rivers rise and fall, obviously, at least here, not tidally, they create piles of drift, and that's where we tend to find nurdles. Specifically, also, if we're working along a shoreline, I tend to look at creek mouth confluences as really good stranding points. Obviously, all of the access issues that the folks from Charleston pointed out about making sure you're on public property, comes into play, and we won't get into how WOTUS affects all of that. But the other places that I'll look as well, of course, is around areas that we've identified production facilities. We also look on rail crossings. Obviously, it's not legal for folks to walk up and down railroad tracks, but there's a lot of transportation issues around plastic pellets, and they wash into our water bodies. And so it can be a great place to look for sources. Stormwater outfalls is another good place where there can be drift zones. And we've also had good or bad luck, depending on how you want to look at it, looking at stormwater retention areas as well that are related to production or transportation facilities. We've done something a little unique as well. We've worked up in the river too, and this wouldn't necessarily relate to how we would report to Nurdle Patrol, but we run a trawl in the river upstream and downstream of facilities. And we have a whole protocol that we've developed around that, making it up as we go along. But it's been pretty effective to figure out point sources for nurdles, and I'd be happy to share further with anybody when I'm not taking up everybody's time going into those details. One of the other things I wanted to touch on really quickly in the time we have is that, besides reporting to Nurdle Patrol, again, as water keepers, we're really interested in getting regulators to do their work in regulating this pollution, and a lot of that has to do with Clean Water Act, with these facilities losing nurdles through point sources. So, of course, when I started to find nurdles at a facility that we're now in the settlement stages of a lawsuit with a styrofoam production facility. Sorry. Oh yeah. I went initially to our state level environmental protection agency. For us, it's the PADEP. I also made sure that the EPA, who they report to, we're hearing about our issues as well. We have a state level PA Fish and Boat that enforces our clean stream laws. So we went to them, and there could be other good enforcement folks to reach out to if you do find potential point sources of nurdles, or looking at an issue that you can't identify a source of even. And then obviously, and of course, if those don't work, or even in the process of trying to get them to work, having conversations with lawyers early on is always great. If we want to see these things get regulated, we worked with the National Environmental Law Center. They've been great to work with, and they've made a point time and time again to have us tell everybody to reach out to them if they think they're seeing a specific problem, and they'd love to talk about their experience and the potential of taking legal action. And I think that that's what I have for right now. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
All right, now we'll turn it over to Nick and Allison from Five Gyres.
Hi everyone. Well, thank you, Captain Clark. We are just so moved by your work. And y'all, we'll keep it a little bit brief here because I'm sure you have a lot of questions. And it's just an honor to be here with all of our colleagues who are also nerdy about nurdles, and we are also nerdy about nurdles. And we want to take it just a little step further, add one extra layer for everyone here. But real quick, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Allison Woliszewski, Director of Regional Policy and Program Development at Five Gyres, also joined by my colleague, Nick, and Nick will introduce himself momentarily. And we're just here to add one additional layer. If you are doing your nurdle hunt, your pellet count on a national park or federal land, and hint, hint, you may not even know that you are doing your nurdle hunt on a national park or federal land. In fact, I had the pleasure of joining Katie Abair and Charleston Waterkeeper earlier in the year down in Charleston at one of their events, and they were actually organizing a nurdle hunt down on a National Historic District, because the old city in Charleston is actually a National Historic District. But that jumps ahead of our presentation. So at Five Gyres, we are a small NGO like many of our other colleagues here, and we got our start really by studying how much plastic is floating in the world's oceans, where is it accumulation, and wanting to understand how much harm is it causing to the people and planet. And so what we really do is leverage the power of community, science, and advocacy to understand how can we really try and make an impact on plastic pollution. And so one of our community science campaigns is called Plastic Free National Parks, where we crowdsource plastic pollution and do brand audits across all national parks and federal lands, and publish a report each year on what are those trash trends that we are finding in national parks and federal lands. And we'll share our 2024 report in the chat. But what we would like to do is ask any of our friends here who think that they may be doing a nurdle hunt on a federal land, so either maybe a National Historic District near a monument, anything like that, or a national park, to use our federal land tracker to first check and see if you are doing a hunt on a national park or federal land. And Nick will give a demo on our tracker in a moment. And then two, to log it in our Trash Blitz app after you have logged it into Nurdle Patrol. And we'll give a brief demo on step 1 and 2. So Trash Blitz is our mobile app where we ask folks to track items, materials, and brands and your lat long coordinates in our research platform. Fancy word for mobile app. You don't need cell service. You can download it in App Store and in Android, and Nick will jump into that a little bit more. But basically, you're contributing to a national and international data set. So Nick, without further ado, I'd love to introduce you. You are our incredible program associate who manages all things data and trash, and I love to get trashy and talk data And we love to get nerdy about nurdles, but most importantly, why we are asking all of our friends here on this call to go the extra mile and take this extra step is because it is so important for us to make the correlation that there are microplastics. There are both primary and secondary microplastics on national parks and federal lands. And so this is really important because right now, most of the data that we're collecting just demonstrates that there are macroplastics or trash on federal lands. But it's also very important for us to be able to correlate that there are primary microplastics, such as nurdles and plastic pellets on national parks and federal lands. And we've already been finding some this year and documenting that. So I think it will be really, really incredible to see what some of the findings are. And then we also use a lot of this data in our advocacy work, such as supporting legislation like the Reducing Waste in National Parks Act. So without further ado, Nick, we'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give a quick introduction on how to use our map tool and also how to use the TrashBuds app. So I'm just going to take over and share my screen. So I have dropped this link in the chat already. So this is a really cool tool to figure out what federal spaces are near you. And as Allison mentioned, oftentimes people might not know that their favorite park or the shoreline they go to is actually on federal spaces in the United States. So you can use this in your community, or if you're going to be doing a pellet hunt somewhere. So say you're going to be going to Boston, Massachusetts, or you're based there. Then you can type in Boston and you can zoom in and see all these spaces that are federally protected and managed. So if you want to click on a space, so we come up here, say you are in this area of Boston, you can see that this is the Revere Beach Reservation Historic District, or some of these islands out here. We have Boston Harbor National Recreation Area. So it's a cool way just to see what's around you. And then if you want to decide to host your hunt here, we can log it in the TrashBuds app. So now I'm going to just hop over and show you how the TrashBuds app works. So as I also mentioned, this is the tool we use to track waste, and we're going to be using it for tracking pellets in this on this day in these national and federally protected spaces. So you're going to download the TrashBuds app on the Google Play or Apple App Store, make an account, and then you verify with your email. The way we're going to be participating for this event is you go to plastic-free national parks, like Allison was explaining, and oops.
And note, we're asking you to do this after you have logged it into Nerdle Patrol. So it's a step
Right.
2.
And so you're going to then see this list of all these federal spaces. If you're not sure, if you don't see it on this list, you can go to other federal lands. And then when you are finished with your hunt, you've logged into Nerdle Patrol and you just want to report it to us to help further our work with national parks, you're going to go to add item. Of course, most Nerdles don't have brands, so you'll go to the bottom here and express no brand visible. And on this page, you'll just type in Nerdles at the top. And of course, a lot of these are made of plastic. So you'll go to plastic and just put number unknown because these can vary between plastic numbers. On this last page, you'll type in the quantities. So say it's 60. You can add your coordinates, any additional notes you'd like us to know.
Oh,
And then
Nick,
submit your
hold on
PO.
real quick. Even though I'm seeing your screen, I think we're getting some notes in the chat that some folks aren't seeing your shared screen. Could we just do a tech check real quick to see if other folks are seeing the screen?
Yes.
We're getting other comments that it's seen.
Okay, some people can see it.
Oh.
Okay. Cool.
Do-
I guess some people can see it. Okay, fantastic. Sorry.
Is
Thank
visible
you.
for everyone now.
Yeah.
Just to recap, you go to brand. On this page, you'll type in pellets or nurdles, put beer plastic, press plastic number unknown. You can add the quantity that you picked up during your account, say 50, pop in your coordinates, submit the item, and then it'll send off to our database. So we can use this for our reporting. So like I also mentioned, just an additional extra step if you're on these spaces and really help support this work. And my email is right here. next to my name if you have any questions.
Thank you, Nick and Allison. So we've covered a lot of information, and you might be wondering the why of all of this now, which is why I'm going to turn it over to Kelly from PERG, give us an overview about why we're going to be going out and looking for pellets and nurdles.
First of all, thank you so much to all our panelists. I think that was all very valuable information. Okay, so why are we doing all of this? So right now, the reality is that plastic production is expected to nearly double by 2040 and nearly triple by 2060. So if we keep doing everything the exact same way, presumably we will see the amount of plastic pollution just increase, plastic pellet pollution and plastic full stop. So we need to do something differently because there's a lot of ill effects of all this plastic pollution in our environment. So one thing that we have been doing, this International Plastic Pellet Count is part of our advocacy efforts. And what advocacy have we been doing? Some people are working on efforts towards the UN Global Plastics Treaty, and that's to put a cap on plastic production. We've also been working on trying to get state and federal legislation to happen to help curb this amount of pollution. And we've been seeing quite a lot of momentum behind that. So last year we had the federal bill that was in Congress called the Plastic Pellet Free Waters Act, and we did manage to get bipartisan support for that bill. And we were hoping that that bill will be reintroduced this year. We also are seeing an uptick in states getting bills introduced. So this year there's been a bill introduced in Virginia, in Illinois, and in Texas. And we know of several other states that have also been seeing bills that are considering introducing bills. Next slide. So the International Plastic Pellet Count is an opportunity to engage with that advocacy. And we have been really impressed with the response we have got from this event. We have events, people have registered events in over 40 different states and in over 15 different countries. So we really thank you. And one thing that means to us is people care about plastic in their water and they don't want that there. So this International Plastic Pellet Count is part of that effort. So in order to make this the most effective day possible, we need a few things from all of you. So one of those things is, please, if you are hosting an event, please let us know the time of your event and where your event is taking place, because we are making this beautiful map for folks that we will be releasing very soon. And this will also help people that are interested in going to an event connect with that event. Also, make sure that you report what you find. Even if you find reports of 0, this is an important data point, and we want to know this. Also, please try to talk with the media. This helps get more people to know about this issue and helps build grassroots support. If you don't feel very comfortable talking to the media, let us know, and we're really happy to help connect you with resources and help you connect with the media. And also make sure you take photos and send them to us. Next slide. We have also created this WhatsApp group. So feel free to scan this QR code on your screen right now to join Pellet Pursuits. And this is a group where you can ask questions about plastic pellets. You can share what you're finding and also connect with other pelletiers. Okay, next slide. And so beyond this day of the International Plastic Pellet Count, what if you find a bunch of pellets in your backyard? Two things that you really need to do is find out is if this is a chronic problem. Is this an ongoing problem? And then also try to find the source. Next slide. And so then if you do find it as a chronic source and a chronic problem and you have an idea of the source, try to build some advocacy around this, build up your community. And the reason why you should do this is, one, it helps build a record of the problem and it builds momentum for change. So some of the tactics you can do for that are very similar to the tactics we're using right now with the International Plastic Pellet Count. So first, it's important to report your data to your local state Department of Environmental Quality to let them know that there's a problem and give them the opportunity to try to solve it. Then host events and let people know that this is happening. Also, call your representatives, let them know that this problem is happening and invite them to your events and let them know and see firsthand that there's a problem. You can also write op-eds and push for legislation. Next slide. And finally, if you are finding that this is a problem and you're not finding that the other ways are solving it, another option is to do lawsuits. And there have been at least 3 successful lawsuits against plastic pellet polluters. So it is a pretty effective means. It also, besides holding the company accountable, it also helps raise awareness of the issue of plastic pellet pollution, and it gives the opportunity for the industry to also do better. So if you are finding that you have a problem, please let us know and we can help connect you with the lawyers that Captain Evan Clark mentioned previously. And with that, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, so that we have a little bit of system to this, I'm gonna run our Q&A. I'm seeing a common theme in a couple of the questions, so I'm gonna tackle those and then start directing more specific questions to our panelists, if that's all right with everyone. You actually don't have a choice, so I'm just informing you that that's how we're gonna do it. So I think a little bit of nuance of this is that we have some folks joining from organizations who are planning big events or have it a part of that event. And then other folks are just like hoping to go out by themselves or with their family. And so we're excited about all of those different things, but that's also why there's kind of a wide range of information. So just for a couple clarifying points. One, please, if you do nothing else, just log your data on Nurdle Patrol. That's very sufficient. And please say in that notes section that you participated in the International Plastic Pellet Count. We are going to be using that data directly from Nurdle Patrol to put together an advocacy report and share. That way we can continue sharing the story of what we all achieved during this activity. So you don't need to like go on any of our individual organization websites or anything like that. The only wrinkle is if you are on federal land, if you could also put the same information in a trash blitz, that'd be really appreciated so you can be a part of that storytelling as well. Additionally, I know we've been referencing like a day or a window of time. So the official pellet count is on May 3rd. However, we know that people have busy lives and that this is a busy time of year. So anything that's going to be logged between April 27th and May 4th is going to be included in the count. So please don't worry if you're planning something slightly before, but we're really hoping to get as many people out on May 3rd as possible and encourage you to do so. And so I'm now going to jump into a couple of the other questions. So one that it might be for Jace, but anyone can jump in, is are we looking for a new or old strand line?
It's whatever people want to look at. You know, I always start at the new strand line because if there's real high concentrations there, I'm definitely calling my state, agency that's supposed to be monitoring spills and stuff like that. But, if people look down real quick and they don't see anything at the new strand line, then, look up the beach a little bit or the river bank or the lake, wherever you're at, look for the old strand line because most likely you're going to find something there.
Perfect. And another question is, what if some participants collect for 10 minutes and others collect for 20? How should we represent this?
Just put in two different, so it has to be two different Nurdle reports, basically. So one will be the 10-minute report, and then the other group will do, their 20 minutes. Otherwise, the standardized amount is not going to make sense. It's not going to be accurate.
This one might be for Kelly. If there are volunteers from or in the same cities, could you connect us?
I would be happy to. So I believe that one was in New York City. So I I saw somebody was wanting to connect in New York City. So in any case, if you want to connect with other people, you can feel free to reach out to me and I will help connect you with whatever groups we know are in that area. I know that's partially why we have started to make this map, and we should be releasing that within the next week so that you're also able to find events that are happening close to you, which is also why it's so important that if you are hosting events, to please let us know the location and exact times of those events so that we can put those on the map. Also, I just forgot to mention that if you have a registration page, please send that along to us because we can include that in the pin for your event.
I will just slightly editorialize. The reason why, though, I don't think we're going to be proactively matching people up, is that we've received interest from over 500 people in this event, which is amazing and incredible, but makes the pairing up a little difficult, which is why you need to be proactive in reaching out to Kelly if that's something you would like. And then, a question would be if we're collecting data for possible litigation and don't want to share that information at this time, is there a way to add data so it isn't publicly viewable? Which I believe the answer is no, but I'd be curious maybe to hear from Captain Evan Clark how you handled the relationship about collecting for the public versus for litigation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard about half of that because I was looking at the comments and thinking about a different styrofoam question. Can you ask that again?
Yeah, so how did you deal with the balance of collecting data for possible litigation, but being concerned about sharing that data publicly?
So far, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't had concerns about sharing that data publicly. Nerdle Patrol doesn't have a portal to put it in the most public place the for the trawl data that we used mostly, and then a lot of the other data we used legally were just photographs from the sites. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. I am going to keep the mic for a half a second there because I saw in the comments somebody asking about counting styrofoam and nurdles. And I think Jace touched on that really quickly, but I had made a note in my notes as well that my kind of nurdle detection technique is the thumbnail test. If my thumbnail can kind of dig into it like a plastic and it's not hard like a rock or squishy like a piece of styrofoam that's broken off another piece, then then I'm not thinking about that as a nurdle. Though it's worthy of note that the lawsuit that we're in right now is for what we could call styrofoam nurdles that are actually tiny particles of unpopped styrofoam that look more like grains of sand. So hopefully that's helpful there.
Well, and we don't count styrofoam. You wouldn't count styrofoam as a nurdle because that's a product. Polystyrene is the hard, so you can find polystyrene that's kind of clear and, real hard. And so you would count that, but not styrofoam.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. One more question. So from someone who scouted the location, which is great. However, they found 0 pellets when they were scouting. Would we prefer that they choose a location with a higher probability of finding pellets? Or should we continue with doing our local beach cleanup on May 3rd and then where I think there weren't pellets found and then look elsewhere on a different day? Or basically, yeah, Kelly.
I'll answer that question because I believe that question came from Virginia. And we actually have a whole map of wish list locations for Virginia. So I wrote down your name and I will be sending you that map later. So it'd be great if you could go to one of those other locations, but if you can't, we completely understand. And we're happy for you to just also report your data point of 0 and to just continue with another beach cleanup.
Perfect. Another question, is distance or area a factor in a shoreline survey?
You want me to answer that one?
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's certain things when we were developing Nerdle Patrol that you can do with the data and that you can't do One of them is you can't go out and do a 10-minute survey and then say, well, we have so many nurdles per mile, because we're not doing it in a specific area. It's just 10 minutes of searching. Yeah.
Clarifying question, they shouldn't upload anything that isn't hand counted to Nerdle Patrol.
Right. Yeah. If you used any kind of tool, don't add it to Nerdle Patrol.
But we would still love to see photos or find out what you found. So you can email Kelly and I.
I was actually curious about a clarification about counting. I heard from the folks in Charleston recommending to count as you go, and I was wondering, Jace, if that's kind of the overall recommended method. I know that that's something that we've always done, and so our counts sometimes are actually artificially small because you can only pick up so many nurdles in 10 minutes, and we've always gone with count as you go, but it made me curious to hear more.
Yeah, it depends on, that's a great question, because people are like, man, how did somebody find 30,000 in 10 minutes? Well, it depends on the concentration you're finding at the area you're looking. And so if there's a bunch of them, I mean, if there's enough that you're able to just do handfuls of them and pick them up, you're picking them up as fast as you can for 10 minutes. And if there's so many of them, you're not going to be able to count as you go. But a lot of the places you go look, they're going to find 20 to 30 in a 10-minute period. And there's not enough of them to where you're going to get lost in how many there are. But places like Galveston Bay, where the highest concentration of plastic manufacturing goes on in the country, there is just an insane amount of nurdles, and it's almost impossible to count as you go because you're literally getting handfuls of them at a time.
I wanted to also add, typically we don't count as we go in Charleston, at least for Charleston Waterkeepers ambient monitoring. We just recommended that for the International Plastic Pellet Count Day to make it easier for volunteers or people organizing events with a bunch of participants. But that's why we use those pill trays. So we will just collect as many as we can, those 10 minutes, then dump them out, count using the pill tray after the fact.
I like that idea, that pill tray. I'm gonna get me one of those.
They were donated to us by some pharmaceutical company, and they are so useful. They're great.
That's awesome.
Perfect. And then we're at time. So for the final question is how to create awareness to stop plastic pollution. And A, participate in our count. And B, please, when you're filling out Nerdle Patrol, if you feel comfortable, include your email, include that you participated in the event. And that way we can continue to follow up with you to share ways to continue to be involved. And we just deeply appreciate so much of our panelists' time and also your time listening to us today. And we're excited to see what everyone finds.